Let's open this episode with a game, a word association test to be exact. There was this famous psychologist by the name of Carl Jung, and he created this test to better understand what goes on inside our minds. The idea is that the answer you give reveals a lot about your subconscious mind. So, for example, I say dog and maybe you say walk. That lets me know that you're active, or at least you want to make sure that your little dog gets exercise. Now, if I say dog and you say baby, well, you're that person that puts cute clothes on your dog. So when I say dark web, what's the first word that comes to your mind? Is it scary? Is it dangerous? Well, that tells me that you're not a criminal. I mean, a more nefarious person might actually think money, since their mind goes straight to all the illegal ways that they can make a quick buck. But maybe when I say dark web, you think hitmen or drugs. You wouldn't be wrong for thinking that. I mean, here's a little fun fact. Most online hitmen are just cops in disguise. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard about people forking over thousands of dollars to undercover cops. Now, all their money in their bank account will go towards their criminal defense trial. You know, they need to stay out of jail. Okay, maybe your mind thought about something totally different when I said dark web. If I played a word association game with Victor Benjamin, I bet he'd say cybersecurity, analytics, or maybe even web mining. You see, Victor is much more than an ASU professor. He is a total expert in computers, machine learning, and cybersecurity. And today, we're going to share some surprising lessons about the dark web. Now, speaking of which, here's lesson number 1. The dark web will never disappear. It's basically a private part of the internet, since you can't find any of this stuff on, run-of-the-mill search sites. But not everything on the dark web is illegal, but it's the first place that shady operations usually set up shop. Now, the bottom line is that there's a lot more to the internet than the stuff that you find on the surface, and in this episode, Victor and I are going to take you on a deep dive. I mean, have you ever wondered how the dark web really works? Do you want to know why the government can't shut it down? This episode is going to answer your questions. You're also going to learn what kind of things you can buy on the dark web, and what to expect when you actually browse there. Oh wait, a spoiler. It's a lot more complicated than you think. But don't worry, Victor and I are going to break it all down for you. We've got some nuggets of wisdom you're going to be chewing on for a while after this episode. And by the time that we're done, you're going to know so much more about one of the internet's biggest mysteries. So stick with us. We've got some really great stuff coming your way that you don't want to miss. How'd you like to hear about how I saved $456 in just 5 minutes? I used an app called Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Can you remember all the free trials and all the other random subscriptions that you've signed up for? Of course you don't, and that's what they're banking on. I love that with Rocket Money, I can see all of my subscriptions in one place. Then if I see something I don't want, I just tap to cancel, and I never have to get on the phone with customer service. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has helped save its members an average of $720 a year, with over 500 million in canceled subscriptions. Stop wasting money on things that you just don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/Kim. That's rocketmoney.com/Kim. rocketmoney.com/Kim. When people talk about the dark web, they make it sound like this shark-infested ocean. They say it's dangerous, mysterious. Most folks treat the dark web as the internet version of the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, it's true to an extent. There are a lot of dangers lurking on the dark web. But just like the real ocean, there's a lot more going on under the surface. I mean, you can find beautiful kelp forests and coral reefs in shark habitats. The dark web is a lot like that. It can look really scary at first glance, but there's a lot of really impressive stuff you won't find anywhere else. So today's guest is ASU professor Victor Benjamin. He knows more about this than most people. And in this episode of Kim Komando Explains, we're going to slip on our scuba gear and dive into the deep web. Are you ready? Victor, let's jump in. So, Victor, so many people hear the term dark web, right? And they think like, oh no, it's this awful, nasty place where there's criminals and crime, and I can buy hitmen and drugs and child porn and all that other stuff. How would you define the dark web?
Wow. Okay. So that's definitely true. Parts of people's awareness of the dark net and all those evil dark things it is true. But there's also maybe a gray, neutral, or good side to it. So the dark net really is just like an underground portion of the internet where people are wanting to have these communities that are disconnected from the mainstream, day-to-day traditional internet, your traditional social media platforms and all that. Now, why they are wanting to hide their communities, within the dark net, there are various reasons. Some of them could be for illegal, illicit reasons, trading drugs or hacking tools or that type of thing. But there could also be legitimate reasons. If you are a political dissident, for example, in a totalitarian country, maybe you would want to have some sort of information technology and a way to communicate without really being visible to the open internet, right? Or we've even heard of people being unable to purchase prescription drugs in their home country because of prices
Oh.
or whatnot. And so they actually go to the darknet to get the medicines they need. And there's many instances of that. So it could be, the name darknet gives the implication that it's bad, but it's really more so just hidden.
And so, why is it hidden? I mean, how does it become hidden?
Mhm. Yeah, so there's a number of ways a website could become hidden within the darknet. Probably the most popular is that they will use a different protocol that requires some special software to connect to the server hosting this darknet website or the darknet infrastructure. So I'll give you an example. Today, if you want to access the internet, you would just open up your web browser and go to, www dot whatever website you're going to.com, right? Within the
Mhm.
darknet, it's a bit different. So you might have a browser, but it's not using those standard internet protocols, right? It needs to be routed through a special gateway. So the most popular one is one called Tor. That's Tor,
Sure.
and it's also known as the Onion router. And that essentially takes your web requests and routes them to a specialized network and not the traditional infrastructure that supports the traditional internet. So you just need some special software to take your internet communications and route them to non-traditional directions, and then the darknet is built out from there.
Yeah, many years ago, I wanted to take a look at what was out there, and I just hopped on my laptop uh, and really didn't give it too much of thought. This is probably, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And so I get into the dark web, and then all of a sudden, I get this message on my screen that says, "Do not shut your laptop down," and it gives my IP address.
Mhm.
That we are now infecting your computer with all this stuff, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that was so ignoramus of me just hopping right on." And not really having much security on this particular laptop. I mean, it's really not for the and I think it still is not for the uninitiated. I mean, this is something where if you're just used to going to Amazon.com and going to Facebook and Twitter, you need to have, as you mentioned, Victor, you have to be using Tor and you have to have some certain precautions. And as I tell folks, whatever primary computer it is, maybe you don't want to use if that's your full production machine. Um, let's talk a little bit about privacy and anonymity.
Mhm.
Is it possible to have that truly? I mean, you talked about dissidents and buying pharmaceuticals, and is it really capable of being fully private and fully anonymous?
That's a good question. So it's definitely a yes or no question, I would say. So I think for most users, the answer would be no. I think a lot of users have the expectation that you could just use Tor or a different darknet client and just connect to the darknet and you're anonymous from there. But just accessing it doesn't give you inherent anonymity. There's many tricks that can be played against you to really identify who you are. So, for example, if I am not on Tor and just using my normal internet browser and I go to a website, they might drop a cookie or some sort of file
Sure.
on my computer, right? And then when I am on Tor and I'm utilizing the darknet, uh, that cookie is still on my hard drive from when I wasn't anonymized, right? So they could still potentially look into my system if I'm using the incorrect browser or something and identify that cookie and go from there, right? There's also, I remember a couple of years back, a vulnerability with JavaScript where essentially the same thing where someone could put an identifier on your machine when you're just using the internet normally, and then even when you're on tour using JavaScript, functionality, they could still identify who you are. So just connecting to the darknet itself will not give you anonymity. There's other things you have to do to make sure you are scrubbing your identity and not leaking any personally identifiable information. And that's just from a one-off actor, dropping files on your hard drive. There's also been studies of how many resources would you need to sort of hijack the Tor system or other darknet systems, because a lot of them are peer-to-peer and open source, right? So anyone can participate. Well, if you host enough of these entry points into the darknet, you begin to get this encompassing view of who's connecting and who's utilizing the darknet. So if you are a nation state very bent on identifying dissidents and monitoring who's connecting to this darknet and what they're trying to do there, you could just deploy many of these gateway servers that connect or bridge users from the traditional internet to the darknet and monitor their connections from that standpoint. So someone with enough resources and who is committed to attacking the darknet can do so. Yeah.
Yeah, they can do that. It's really interesting when you start looking at all the pathways with the internet. I mean, just as you mentioned, I mean, in order to get to the dark net, you have to go through the regular protocols in order to fire up certain things. In all of your experience with cybersecurity, what are some examples of things that you saw on the dark net that with all your experience you sat back and you went, I can't believe I just read about that, or I can't believe I just heard that happen?
Yeah. There's a lot of them. Probably the most interesting one to me personally that aligns with my research in cybersecurity is this hacktivist campaign called Operation Green Rights. So a hacktivist is someone who is a hacker and their motivation is more political or environmental causes or something like that. Other hackers might be motivated for financial reasons or other reasons. But these hacktivists started a campaign called Operation Green Rights, and it was actually started in 2014 to target the French government because France was presumably destroying some natural wetlands to transition into agriculture. And environmentalists were getting riled up against the French government, and they launched Operation Green Rights that snowballed into a hacktivist campaign that did not just target the French government, but also any Western firm that was accused of causing environmental damage. So Monsanto, DuPont, Syngenta,
Wow.
many different companies were targeted. And you would actually start seeing the email addresses and passwords belonging to those email accounts of employees working at these firms, ending up on the dark net. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So it was crazy to see how that movement sparked off as just this limited interaction against the French government, and it just snowballed more and more into a global campaign for environmental rights.
And what kind of time frame did it take from the inception to when you started seeing all these email addresses and these passwords? I mean, did it happen in a week, in a month, or was it quicker than
Oh
that?
yeah, so definitely there was quick wins, I would say, right in the beginning for the hacktivists. So we did see some passwords and emails get dumped within the first initial weeks, and that caused a lot of hype and excitement among the hacker community. And we saw a campaign that lasted several months from that point forward.
But it's interesting that when you talk about any type of action that happens online, that like groups will find like groups, and then exponentially, whatever that movement is, it just happens. It seemingly to me, it just happens so
Mhm.
quickly versus like in the old school days, we'd have to actually like call somebody, write a letter, whatever it may be, in order to bring a like group of
Yeah.
people together. Um,
I'll give a
when we
caveat to
start,
that, actually, if I can expand on it. So one thing that hackers have to be careful about is there is oftentimes honor among thieves, where hackers do
yes.
not, attack each other and whatnot. But sometimes we do see actors enter these hacktivist campaigns or these coordinated efforts to disseminate their own hacking tools. Like, hey, use this to help you launch attacks against the French government, for example. But those hacking tools themselves have backdoors. So the hackers themselves will end up trying to attack each other, and it becomes a very convoluted mess. So there is kind of a call to arms where hackers want to congregate and group together. But after a certain level of critical mass is reached, there are malicious actors who enter that space and try to infect other hackers and so on. So it becomes I guess this nasty cycle that kind of occurs.
I recently spoke to, he's a cyber forensics expert who works on ransomware
Mhm.
cases. And he's called in by the insurance companies to negotiate with the threat actors. And so he was recently called in for a hospital that was taken down. They were actually using pen and paper, the charts, and all this, nightmare type scenarios. The insulin pumps are down, the cardiac machines are down. And so they call up this guy. And he actually sent me a text showing me the conversation between him and the threat actor, where the threat actor said, we are demanding X amount in ransomware. And he wrote him and said, do you understand that this is a hospital? And the guy wrote him back and said, didn't know that. I'll get back to you.
Mhm.
And then wrote him back 24 hours later and said, here's all the decryption keys. We're really sorry. We didn't know that you were a hospital. So it's kind of like, yes, there is kind of an honor among thieves, that there are certain institutions that maybe that the ransomware and the threat actors, or whatever you want to call them, the bad guys and gals, that they won't hit. Um, we hear about now that ransomware is obviously still up and running, speaking of, and that it's targeting social engineering and small outfits, doctors' offices, as well as large businesses and municipalities and, anybody under the sun. And so now there's this movement on the darknet of ransomware as a service. So we all know about software as a service. I mean, it used to be where you'd go out and you'd buy Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, Excel, or Adobe, whatever it is. But now it's all up on the web, and it's called software as a service, because basically you're not downloading the software, you're not buying the software, you're just going to a website and you're using it. Well, what's happening on the darknet right now is that if you want to suddenly go into the ransomware business, is that you can get on the darknet and you can say, hey, look at me, I've got some money. And they even provide toll-free support numbers. That's right. So if you have customers that you hit with ransomware, that they actually provide tech support, so that somebody who doesn't know about Bitcoin, they can figure out how to send you your Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin, whatever it is that you want. So stay right where you are. So coming right back, we're going to talk to Victor Benjamin more about cybersecurity, the darknet, and really software as a service. Just fascinating. How'd you like to hear about how I saved $456 in just 5 minutes? I used an app called Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Can you remember all the free trials and all the other random subscriptions that you've signed up for? Of course you don't, and that's what they're banking on. I love that with Rocket Money, I can see all of my subscriptions in one place. Then if I see something I don't want, I just tap to cancel, and I never have to get on the phone with customer service. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has helped save its members an average of $720 a year, with over 500 million in canceled subscriptions. Stop wasting money on things that you just don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/Kim. That's rocketmoney.com/Kim. rocketmoney.com/Kim. Hey, welcome back to Kim Komando Explains. We're in conversation with Victor Benjamin, big-time security expert, cybersecurity expert, and researcher. And Victor, the software as a service, it just insanely interests me that we have this whole portion of society where I could go And suddenly, just like I want to make a video or keep my books or do anything like that, that now I can tap into, I guess you'd say, threat actor experience in software and downloads and suddenly get into the business?
Yeah, so it's very fascinating stuff. A lot of the hackers out there they don't see themselves as bad people. They're just trying to make a quick buck on the dark net, right? And this is an increasing trend we're seeing where hackers are offering different hacking tools or hacking services for pay. So they become mercenaries for hire. Um, a lot of times this could be from the standpoint of offering a hacking tool that has become obfuscated and fully undetectable to existing antivirus software. So they might sell that, particularly with ransomware, or they may conduct a service where they perform the whole attack for the client. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so we see more and more of this sort of activity.
So, Victor, how much do these kits cost? I mean, do I have to come up with $5,000 or $10,000? I mean, is it something that anybody could get into if they really wanted to?
Yeah, regarding cost, there are a variety of tiers that are accessible to different customer bases, anywhere from the tens or $50 or so to a couple hundred, depending on the sophistication of the attack, what type of vulnerability is being used. If it's something that's relatively unknown, like a 0-day vulnerability, that's going to be a lot more expensive than performing some attack that relies on known vulnerabilities that may be patched by potential targets. So there is a great scope of pricing available out there. But for the average person, there are accessible attacks and services out there you can afford today if you have a potential target in mind, right? And and you're
It's crazy. And, it's just crazy to hear you say that because it's just like, oh yeah, sure, I could do that too. I mean,
yeah, and
it's amazing.
and you're absolutely right about customer service. A lot of these places do have their, phone number you can call, or even warranty policies. So we see something called carding shops quite a bit as well, where perhaps a hack was successfully conducted and they've stolen, the hackers have stolen a lot of credit cards or social security numbers. They'll post that up on a shop. And if you are a consumer who buys these stolen credit cards and it turns out that card that you purchase does not work, you can actually get a refund or an exchange at this hacking shop. So they've developed very sophisticated services and customer service experiences.
So, how much data is on the dark net about the average American? I mean, what would it be like our name, our social security number,
Mm.
our address, maybe, obviously our credit cards,
Mhm.
tax information. What else is out there?
Yeah, so you'd be surprised. There's quite a bit. You can imagine there are perfectly legitimate websites today out there where you can search for your public records, right, and find your address, all email addresses you've ever used, potentially, even your criminal arrest records, right? So if that's available on the traditional mainstream internet, we can only imagine what is in the dark net. And there could be, if you were an early internet user in the 2000s, likely your email addresses you've used back then, those services were compromised and your emails were leaked, as well as your passwords you were using at the time. All that information is available out there on the dark net. So depending on how long you've been using the internet personally, you might be able to go and retrace that history on the dark net. Probably someone has a file out there containing details of what you've done. So I'd say for the average American, there's actually a substantial amount, more than you would think.
And of course, the most compromised is the password, is it?
I would say definitely email addresses and passwords. And the reason being is because, over your history of using the internet, each individual, we've likely registered to many websites and web services out there, right? And it's only a matter of time before one of them gets compromised. And when it gets compromised, you're going to see your details eventually end up on the dark net. It becomes even more incredibly painful when you're using the same credentials across many web platforms
Yeah.
because all
Oh, yeah. That's a nightmare. Yeah.
yeah, all it takes is a hacker finding your credentials for one website. They're going to go try it at Google. They'll try it at Netflix, your PayPal, anything they can try to get access to learn more about you and potentially disrupt your financial details or try to steal money from you or whatnot.
We always talk about passwords, that they need to be 8 letters, upper, lower case, a gang sign, a hieroglyphic. I mean, anything else that you can throw in it. Over the years, it's been 8 characters, 12 characters, 15 characters. Is there a specific methodology that you would recommend for a password?
Yes. So really, the secret is to make it as long as you can, because a computer doesn't necessarily distinguish between a letter, a number, or some other sort of symbol. So whether you're using a one or an exclamation mark, it's the same to a computer. So really, the key is to have as long as a password as you can, and to make it easily rememberable. So the thing I choose for myself is to select quotes from books or lyrics of songs where it's something that I can very easily remember, but you can chain together several words and come up with a lengthy password.
And that's what I've done too. And then you can make it unique for each website.
Mhm, mhm.
And when you look at it, it looks like a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo, but in reality, it's like you said, it's a phrase. It's something that that the letter I is an exclamation mark or an S is a dollar sign. And so you can come up with your own moniker so that this way you don't use the same password at every single website. And so many people do that. And I'm sure you've seen the list, Victor, where it's like the most commonly used passwords, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then they go, okay, I'm gonna make it really hard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, or they say, let me in. That's always another one. I mean, or password 1, 2, 3, 4, or it's your date of birth or whatever it be. So so you want to come up with that that phrase, that thing that you are going to remember that is unique to you, and then make it unique for whatever site that you're visiting. And you can come up with a formula in your head. What do you think, based on all your years of experience, what do you think of password managers?
Yeah, so password managers, I personally am not a huge fan of because I see it as a single point of failure, but that's just my perspective. I think they've been effectively used by others, but you do have to kind of worry about the master key that unlocks everything. So if you're going to use a password manager, I would say just be careful that no one obtains the one password to unlock your the manager itself, I suppose. Another thing I see trending that I think will be increasingly important is just two-factor authentication. So you can type your password into a website, but then it'll send you a text to your cell phone, and with a code you have to type in or something. And just that additional code or signal it sends you that you have to confirm really helps authenticate that you are who you say that you are, and that can close out a lot of potential cyber attacks against your accounts.
Okay, so the password drill is the same, and two-factor authentication. You want to set that up on all your accounts, and you want to be smart. You want to have security software, uh, and you want to make sure that you're not going to phishing websites and responding to scammers. I mean, gosh, there's just so much that the average consumer
Mhm.
needs to remember. Is there one particular point of failure that you see time and time again?
Uh, Usually the user is too trusting, right? And or not paying attention to details and slips up and gets into something they shouldn't. But one thing that would help most users a lot that I don't see them practicing today is to practice maybe using two separate browsers. So one browser, personally, I like to use one browser for all of my personal confidential stuff like banking and all that, and another browser for my general internet surfing. And the reason why I make this suggestion is that there are an increasing amount of vulnerabilities that are browser based, such as getting JavaScript code to run without, a server could get JavaScript code to run on your local computer without you really authorizing that code to run. And that could lead to vulnerabilities within that browser space. So separating your online activities by browsers helps mitigate some of that. Where if one browser gets compromised, hopefully it was not the browser that you used to log in to sensitive websites, and it may have your passwords cached or something like that, right? So that can help a lot. But beyond that, just practicing good internet habits, paying attention to URLs that you're not getting phished. Make sure that you're on a legitimate website. It just takes a level of awareness, I'd say.
Are there specific browsers that you recommend that you use?
So they're all pretty decent today. I guess the standards are, if you're on Windows, it comes packaged with
Edge.
Internet Explorer, Safari on iOS. I also like Google Chrome and Firefox, but those aren't the only ones. I think a lot of the browsers are kind of converging on the base technology they're using, and so they're
Mhm.
actually all becoming fairly similar, aside from their front end interface, how it looks to the user. But nonetheless, just using two separate browsers, it has a different directory structure on your computer, and code will interact with the browsers independently and they won't cross over. So having to
That's pretty smart. I have some questions. We're going to blow through these very
okay.
quickly. Questions from people about that I've received about the dark web, and so let's go through these really quickly. Okay. Um, okay. Here's a question: Why doesn't the dark web just get closed down?
It's peer to peer and open source. You can't really just close it down.
How big is the dark web?
Uh, Unknown, I guess. It's
Huge.
yeah, unknown. Yeah.
Um, Here's another one. This isn't. We didn't really get into
Mhm.
this, but how is the dark web? Is the dark web the same as the deep web?
Yes. Different terminology, but
Um,
yes. Mhm.
but yes, it is. Okay. We talked about privacy and anonymity. Oh, here's a great one. Will I get into trouble if I simply take a look? If I simply get to her? If I simply go into because I want to see how a storefront looks on the dark net?
Depends what country you're in, but in America, you won't be in trouble.
And finally, if I go on the dark net, does it make me a bigger target for hackers?
Yes.
In what way?
So a lot of these darknet websites will have browser vulnerabilities like running in JavaScript loaded on the server to infect unsuspecting users. So if you're not taking proper precautions and you're just surfing the darknet, if your browser is vulnerable, you might get infected by one of these server-side scripts. Now, if you're using the most up-to-date Tor browser, it is typically safeguarded against these attacks. So there's a modified version of Firefox called the Tor browser, and that is has JavaScript turned off and stripped out, as well as the different different levels of security precautions taken to prevent what we call a remote code execution attack. And the remote code execution attack would be the server executing JavaScript code through your browser without you knowing.
Okay, one last question. What do you think the biggest threat this coming year is going to be for cybersecurity?
The biggest threat.
That's my question to you. That's not from a listener.
Yeah.
I'm wondering because you're deep in trench of this.
Yeah. I'm going to say user error. I think the software engineers and companies are doing a better and better job integrating security within software, but the failing point is still typically the user. Either they don't appropriately use the software application and skimp out on some security features, or they just use really weak passwords, or even leave a notepad with their password on their desk, for example. So you can build as much inherent security as you want into a system, but the user at the end of the day has to use the system appropriately, and sometimes they just don't.
Yeah, I have a campaign that I've been trying to get off the ground, and it's just I want people to remember one phrase, just one phrase, and that's stop and think, don't click the link,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because
Exactly.
there's always this sense of urgency, like you better do it right now, So, but if they just stop and think, just stop, take a deep breath, think, and then don't click. Don't click the link. I think we'll be much better. Victor, thank you so much for joining us. And whenever you have something huge, something great, something you want to talk about, call us, ping me, whatever, DM me, whatever, because I really, you're really wonderful. And I can tell that we just scratched the surface, and I want to be able to continue this dialogue. Okay?
Will do. Thank you very much.
You got it. Thank you. How'd you like to hear about how I saved $456 in just 5 minutes? I used an app called Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Can you remember all the free trials and all the other random subscriptions that you've signed up for? Of course you don't, and that's what they're banking on. I love that with Rocket Money, I can see all of my subscriptions in one place. Then if I see something I don't want, I just tap to cancel, and I never have to get on the phone with customer service. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has helped save its members an average of $720 a year, with over 500 million in canceled subscriptions. Stop wasting money on things that you just don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/Kim. That's rocketmoney.com/Kim. rocketmoney.com/Kim. Okay, remember what I said earlier? The dark web will never disappear. I mean, in this episode, we taught you a lot about how the dark web works. And I want to end with this note. Do not ever forget how dangerous it can be. Accessing the dark web, it's not illegal, but there's a lot of things on there that can land you into a lot of trouble. The federal agents took down Silk Road. That was that popular online marketplace for drugs. I mean, they can take you down too, if you're not careful. And don't forget how much disturbing content is on there. I mean, you might stumble onto some really horrifying materials. I'll tell you, it's not for the faint of heart. So unless you have a really compelling reason to go to the dark web, just stay away. Hey, thanks for listening. Just a quick reminder, if you like this podcast, be sure to share it with your friends and rate and review and say some nice words about our podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can leave us a wonderful review. And to Victor Benjamin, thanks for sharing your time and know-how with us. You're an amazing guest, and I can't wait until we have a chance to chat again. And if you have any comments about our podcast, it's really simple. We have a special email address set up. And just send it to podcasts@commando.com. Oh, one more thing. If you're looking for the 3-hour weekend Kim Commando Show podcast, the best place to get it is over at getkim.com. And once again, that address is getkim.com. And of course, I'm Kim Commando, and thanks for joining us.
Tax day is coming.
Oh, no.
But if you sign up for Robinhood Gold's IRA with a 3% match, you can get up to $195 for the 2023 tax year.
Oh, yeah.
Sign up at Robinhood.com/boost by tax day to get the biggest contribution match on the market. Subscription fees apply.
Investing involves risk. 3% match requires gold for 1 year from first match. Must keep IRA for 5 years. Robinhood Financial, LLC, member SIPC.
Before Shopify, were you wondering, where are my sales at? Now you're selling with Shopify, the global commerce platform supercharging your selling. You have no problem selling online, in person, on social media, and beyond. Gary, easy on the cha-ching.
Oh, sorry, but my Shopify sales are through the roof.
Start selling with Shopify today and discover how millions of businesses around the world use Shopify to ignite their selling. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/listen. Shopify.com/listen.